What's going on, summoners? Welcome back to another ProGuides video. Today, we're going over mid-game macro for Season 2021. These mid-game macro tips have been tested by our challenger coaches, and we'll be going over how to transition into the mid-game effectively in every lane, the different situations you'll likely encounter in the mid-game, good strategies for mid-game macro, how to play from behind or expand your lead, and of course, finish the game effectively. Make sure to smash that sub button to receive notifications on guides that you won't want to miss out on. To start this guide, it's useful to define when the mid-game begins, as it's often ambiguous when a naturally flowing game like League of Legends gets divided so artificially. Oftentimes, it's defined as when the laning phase ends, which is a pretty good definition to use as the game transitions significantly after that point. For this guide, that's the definition we'll be using. Mid-game macro is also heavily dependent on what role you're playing and what class of champion you picked, as well as what the enemy team comp is, and of course, what your win condition is. With all of these factors in play, there can be a lot of variation when it comes to mid-game plays, so we'll be going over the most common strategies to help you out in your ranked games. If we were to give you one tip, it's that when you consider what to do during your mid-game macro decisions, always think about how long you want the game to go on for, along with what your win condition is and what the enemy win condition is, and also how your team fighting and split pushing is against the enemy team. For instance, it can be a good idea to give up a dragon and a Rift Herald if it means avoiding a teamfight against a superior foe if you have a scaling team composition. So in that case, delaying the game for as long as you need is a good idea until you get your power spikes. Just make sure to not set yourself too far behind in global gold, as that can cause you to fall behind in items too much. What's often the best strategy for a jungler and a support is to play around the strongest laner. This can be a bruiser or carry top laner, or a Fed 80 carry, or even a strong assassin mid laner. Generally, if you put your resources behind your strongest ally, it's a better investment as they will deal significantly more damage to the enemy if you keep them alive rather than spreading your resources too thin. If you did spread out your resources, it's more likely for your strong ally to get picked off by a squad of opponents and therefore giving the enemy a shutdown and losing your lead as a team drastically. Oftentimes, teams will want to switch lanes in the mid-game in order to get better advantages when rotating, placing vision, and getting objective control around the map. Before we move on though, I want to go over our question of the day. Which champion do you think is the strongest in the mid-game? While not exclusively, I think Jhin is a pretty powerful pick overall at all stages of the game, but especially when he hits that 2-item power spike in the mid-game, he does insane burst damage. But let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Now, back to the video. When mid-game rotations begin after the first towers fall, this usually takes the form of bot lane rotating to mid so that there are more bodies around the center of the map. This gains you much needed priority around the entire map, allowing you a lot of agency to make more plays. This means that your solo laners will be on both side lanes, attempting to either split push, freeze, or just flat out solo kill their opponents. If you're playing an assassin mid lane, it's often a good idea to try to place yourself on the side lane so that you have solo kill opportunities to try and snowball yourself into the mid and late game. This is a good strategy as those lanes are more isolated during the mid game, as lots of focus will instead be diverted towards gaining control of the center of the map. Top laners often decide on either split pushing or grouping with the team in the mid game. This often is heavily dependent on who the top laners are playing, as that lane is heavily champ defined. For example, if you're Camille versus a Malphite top lane, it might be in your best interest to try and keep Malphite from grouping with his team by applying as much pressure as possible top lane. This is because Malphite can have a huge impact on teamfights with his ultimate, while Camille is better at skirmishing and picking people off. So in this instance, split pushing is a good option for Camille, as it enables her win condition more than it enables Malphite's, as Malphite will only be able to join a teamfight with his teleport up. Meanwhile, Camille can try to pressure Malphite by staying within E range to cancel his TP, or just by perma-pushing the waves and trading with him constantly, therefore risking the tower dying or even Malphite dying to Camille himself. In top lanes that are both split pushers, it's often who can outduel the other that gains control of the lane. But be wary, anyone who pushes too far does risk being rotated on by the enemy team if they aren't seen on the map. Since you're far from your own team, this makes you quite vulnerable to the goon squad. Oftentimes, when these skirmishes take place in the mid-game, skirmishes around the center of the map develop a lot more frequently, unless the side lane is overextended a lot. This is due to just the sheer number of bodies roaming around the center of the map at this time. Junglers and supports juggling each other's vision and pathing, attempting to find picks for each other's team. Oftentimes, if one side lane has priority, you'll see the jungler and support rotate from mid lane, or your friendly jungle to roam with that laner towards the enemy jungle to try and find picks. This is an effective strategy to set the enemy jungler far behind while still grabbing good vision control of the enemy side of the map, granting your side lanes more security and allowing you to focus your attention more around the center of the map. What defines the mid game most prominently is the rotations from team members between lanes, in the jungle, and towards objectives. This is what must be constantly monitored, as getting solo XP in the side lanes can be a dangerous operation. And if you're the bot lane who rotated towards mid to apply pressure to the turret there, then you don't want to be flanked by rotating solo laners either. These types of occurrences are common, and can often lead to tempo leads for one team or another, allowing them to get objectives around the map. Oftentimes rotations are really difficult for players to learn, so if you need extra help with learning about them, make sure to hit up our professional coaches at ProGuides.com. You can get one-on-one sessions and they'll go through the basics or even more advanced techniques with you, so check them out. But now enough about rotations and skirmishes. Let's talk about what plagues a lot of us in solo queue, which is how to end games effectively in the mid game. This often comes down to exploiting the enemy team's weak spots while ignoring their strong points, and at the same time ignoring your weak spots and exploiting your strong points. This is why you often see high elo players perma-diving one lane over and over and over again in solo queue. This makes sure that your one lane is so snowballed that no matter what the enemy team does, they just won't be able to stop that lane from doing what it likes. If you have a lead in the mid game, it's almost always a good idea to try and fight the enemy team, as you have more gold and therefore more item spikes that will most likely win you the fights. To do this, you need to rotate, threaten, and kill objectives such as Dragon and Rift in order to either force a fight or just get free objectives. Otherwise, you try to group siege down towers in order to threaten a fight or try to rotate between lanes, trying to pick people off in their jungle with deep vision in order to push afterwards. Oftentimes, getting the second Rift Herald is critical to this strategy, or even forcing an early Baron. Just be careful not to get baited into a bad Baron fight or get baited into them stealing your Baron. Try to rotate off of it when the enemy team threatens to fight you on it, as you don't want to take too much damage or risk losing it. Remember, your main objective in the mid game is to destroy their inhib towers in the mid game to open up their base to sieges easily. This essentially forces the enemy team to split up and makes them cover the lane that has the destroyed inhib, as otherwise the minions will push and do damage to the Nexus towers. Not to mention, split pushers or laners with TP can also push through there and just threaten to end the game. With the enemy team split, you have an easier time taking objectives like Baron or another inhibitor, as you can force 4v5 fights much more easily. Who knows, you might even win the fight and just end the game. To do this effectively requires tempo and coordination. Not something that you often see in the solo queue ladder, but if you have a dedicated squad, this can be done quite handily. Even a duo queue partner can help immensely. Now that we've explored how to play when you're ahead, I'm going to give you some tips that I've learned when playing from behind. Essentially, just think about the opposite of the tips that I gave you earlier when you have a lead. Instead of grouping and trying to force fights, instead split up the enemy team and pick off stragglers rotating between lanes or objectives. Generally, fighting as 5 against their team with more gold and items is not a strategy for success, and that's why we try to equalize our gold by instead just picking off clueless roamers. Then we have a much better chance at fighting a 4v5 later on. At the same time, that sometimes means not getting baited at fights near Dragon or Baron. The enemy team will try to fight you at these objectives, and even though it's tempting, you can sacrifice a Dragon here or there to try to get objectives on the other side of the map, like turrets or Rift Herald, further equalizing your gold for the next Dragon. Just try and make sure you're funneling your gold and experience onto the best scaling champion. You don't want to be funneling gold onto that Pantheon past 25 minutes. When playing from behind, it's really important to try and get gold funneled into the hands of your carries who will do more damage in the mid to late game. And that sometimes means sacrificing golden XP for other laners and even maybe yourself that might be useful for CC or tanking, but like I said, not carrying the fight with damage. This is because you really need to maximize your bang for your buck when playing from behind, as fights will be close and that extra item for your carry can make all the difference in the world. So let's summarize today's topics in this video. Mid-game macro is heavily dependent on win conditions. Do you want the game to go on for longer to secure the win, or end it sooner through snowballing your strong allies? We went over how to rotate lanes after the first turrets fall and laning phase ends, what some strong strategies are for side laners depending on their role in the team, the importance of the center of the map in the mid-game through bot lane and jungle presence, the significance of tempo and snowballing leads through picks and skirmishes that translate into objectives, and even the importance of giving up objectives when you're behind to buy time for item spikes for your team. Hopefully some of these tips will be helpful in your ranked games, and remember that improvement comes at a steady pace. Try to implement these one at a time and do them correctly rather than sloppily. Well, that'll wrap up our video on mid-game macro. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Always appreciate the support. If you want to support even more, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell button so you don't miss out on future uploads, and also check out the Discord in the description down below. We'll be dropping more content to help you guys improve, so keep an eye out on our channel, but most importantly, stay safe, stay hydrated, and good luck on the Rift.